Well, it's anger, confusion, and total heartbreak for a Benton County man whose daughter was fatally shot while behind the wheel of an Amazon delivery truck.
Pay attention to Jasmine Sky Taylor, 23 years old, driving her Amazon delivery route through Lawrence County, Missouri on February 5th, 2025. It was late afternoon, the kind of overcast winter day where darkness comes early and rural roads feel even more isolated. She had dozens of packages left to deliver before her shift ended. On this day, Jasmine planned to finish her route, clock out, and head home to Joplin, 45 minutes south. On this day, Thomas Coy, 65 years old, would make a decision that would end her life and destroy any remaining years of his own. Jasmine Taylor wasn't chasing fame or fortune with Amazon. At 23, she was doing what millions of gig economy workers do, earning money, staying independent, building towards something bigger. The blue vest, the scanner, the endless packages, it was honest work, hard work, the kind of work that requires you to drive to strangers' homes in unfamiliar places, trust that people will be decent, and believe that doing your job won't get you killed. But on paper, February 5th looked like any other shift. Jasmine loaded packages at the fulfillment center, programmed her route into the GPS, and started making deliveries across Lawrence County. One house after another, scan the package, walk to the door, take the photo, move to the next stop. The algorithm doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if the address is remote. It just sends you to the next pin on the map. She had no idea that the address she was approaching, a property on Lawrence County Road 2152, belonged to a man who would shoot first and answer questions later. A man whose neighbors would later describe as keeping to himself. A man who, in the span of a single minute, would transform from an anonymous rural homeowner into a confessed murderer. At approximately 5:47 p.m., Jasmine's Amazon delivery van pulled into Thomas Coy's driveway. The dashcam was recording. The GPS logged the arrival. The scanner confirmed, package ready for delivery. Everything routine, everything normal, everything about to go catastrophically wrong. What happened in the next 73 seconds has been pieced together from Amazon camera footage, forensic evidence, and Thomas Coy's own confession. But the one thing investigators have never been able to answer, the one question that haunts this entire case, is the simplest and most terrifying. Why? Footage interruption loop, pass home. Watch how the van moves in those final seconds. Jasmine is driving slowly, carefully navigating the gravel driveway. Professional, cautious. A driver who's made hundreds of deliveries just like this one. That caution tells us she had no idea what was about to happen. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't distracted. She was doing her job. Somewhere on that property, Thomas Coy was watching her approach. He had a pellet rifle, not a traditional firearm, but a weapon capable of causing serious injury or death. And as Jasmine's van entered his driveway, he made a decision that would end her life. He raised the rifle, he aimed, and he fired. The bullet struck Jasmine in the head while she was still in the driver's seat. The van immediately swerved, crashed through a wire fence, and came to rest, nose first, in an empty field. And then, as Jasmine sat bleeding and dying behind the wheel, Thomas Coy did something that would prove this wasn't an accident, wasn't a warning shot, wasn't a misunderstanding. He walked to the crashed van. He opened the door, and he dragged her body out. At 6:03 p.m., just 16 minutes after Jasmine's van pulled into the driveway, a neighbor called 911 to report a traffic accident on Lawrence County Road 2152. They'd seen the crashed Amazon van in the field. They'd seen the damaged fence. They assumed the driver had swerved to avoid an animal or lost control on the gravel road. Rural Missouri accidents happen all the time. Nobody suspected foul play. When first responders arrived, they found Jasmine lying in a roadside ditch, critically injured, unresponsive. Her Amazon van sat crumpled against the fence, 30 feet away. Packages were scattered across the field. Everything looked like a tragic accident. A young driver who'd lost control, crashed, and been thrown from her vehicle. Paramedics rushed Jasmine to Freeman Hospital in Joplin with life-threatening injuries. Emergency room doctors began the desperate process of trying to save her life. CT scans, X-rays, trauma protocols, and that's when they found something that changed everything. This is where the official story starts to fracture. On the X-ray, illuminated against Jasmine's skull, doctors saw a small metallic object, not bone fragments from impact, not debris from the crash. a pellet, a bullet, lodged in her brain from a rifle shot to the head. Jasmine Taylor hadn't been in an accident. She'd been shot, and whoever shot her had tried to make it look like she'd crashed. Watch what happens next in the Amazon footage. The timestamp shows Thomas Coy approaching the crashed van. His movements are deliberate, not panicked. He reaches the driver's door. He opens it. And then, in footage that Amazon cameras captured in full, he drags Jasmine's body from the vehicle and places her in the roadside ditch. That action destroys any possibility of this being an accident. He didn't call 911. He didn't render aid. He didn't check if she was alive. He moved her body to make it look like she'd been ejected in a crash. When Lawrence County Sheriff's deputies returned to Thomas Coy's property, armed with the medical evidence, the X-ray showing the pellet, the trajectory analysis, the Amazon footage, Thomas Coy confessed immediately. He admitted shooting Jasmine Taylor. He admitted moving her body. But when detectives asked the one question that mattered most, his answer would make this case even more disturbing. Why did you shoot her? The question hung in the interrogation room. Thomas Coy, 65 years old, sat across from detectives who'd just shown him the evidence. Amazon camera footage of him dragging a dying woman from her van. Medical scans showing the pellet lodged in her brain. GPS data proving she was making a legitimate delivery to his address. He couldn't deny it. The evidence was overwhelming. So he confessed. Yes, he shot her. Yes, he moved her body. Yes, he knew she was an Amazon driver making a delivery. But why? That's the question that investigators, prosecutors, and Jasmine's family have been asking since February 5th, 2025. And as of today, February 2nd, 2026, nearly 1 year later and days before his murder trial is set to begin, Thomas Coy has never provided a coherent answer. This is where the evidence stops making logical sense, unless you understand that some violence has no logic. Jasmine wasn't trespassing. She was delivering to his address. She wasn't threatening him. She was doing her job. She wasn't even out of her vehicle when he shot her. The weapon itself raises questions. A pellet rifle, not a traditional firearm, designed for pest control, target practice, small game hunting, not typically a weapon of choice for someone genuinely fearing for their life. So, was this premeditated? Was he waiting for a delivery driver to arrive? Or was it something else? Paranoia? Mental illness? A property owner who decided that anyone entering his driveway was a threat? Rural isolation that had twisted into something dark and violent? The lack of motive doesn't make Thomas Coy less guilty. It makes him more dangerous. Because if there was no reason, if Jasmine Taylor died simply because she pulled into the wrong driveway while doing her job, then it means any delivery driver, any Amazon worker, any person whose GPS sends them down a rural road could be next. While Thomas Coy sat in custody waiting for his trial, Jasmine Taylor fought for her life in Freeman Hospital. The pellet had caused catastrophic brain damage. Doctors did everything they could. But on February 9th, 2025, 4 days after she was shot, Jasmine Sky Taylor died. She was 23 years old, and her death meant Thomas Coy would now face first-degree murder charges carrying a potential life sentence. February 5th through February 9th, 4 days, 96 hours. That's how long Jasmine's family sat in hospital waiting rooms, praying for a miracle that would never come. Her mother, her father, her siblings, her friends, they gathered at Freeman Hospital, taking shifts, holding hands, refusing to give up hope. When you're 23 years old, you're supposed to be invincible. You're supposed to have decades ahead of you. You're supposed to survive. But the bullet had done too much damage. The trauma was too severe. And on February 9th, surrounded by family who loved her, Jasmine Sky Taylor's heart stopped beating. The death changed everything legally. What had been assault, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence became first-degree murder. Thomas Coy would no longer be facing years in prison. He would be facing the possibility of dying behind bars. The last person to see Jasmine Taylor alive other than her killer was likely another Amazon driver or a coworker at the fulfillment center. Someone who saw her load her van that morning. Someone who said, "See you later," without knowing it would be the last time. Someone who checked the driver app that evening and noticed Jasmine's route had stopped moving. That person became the last witness to Jasmine's normal life. They saw her before the violence, before the gunshot, before everything fell apart. And in those missing hours between when her van went silent and when the neighbor called 911, a 23-year-old woman trying to earn money by delivering packages was erased from existence, not by accident, not by fate, but by deliberate, unexplained violence. On January 16, 2026, Thomas Coy appeared in court for his preliminary hearing. After reviewing the evidence, the Amazon footage, the confession, the medical examiner's report, the judge bound him over for trial on first-degree murder charges. His trial is scheduled for February 2026, exactly 1 year after he ended Jasmine Taylor's life. But even as the trial approaches, the one question everyone wants answered remains unanswered. Why did he do it? Amazon delivery vehicles are equipped with multiple cameras, forward-facing dash cams that record the road ahead, interior cameras that monitor driver behavior, and AI-powered systems that track everything from speed to braking to delivery completion rates. For Amazon, these cameras are about liability, protection, and quality control. For law enforcement, they became the key to solving Jasmine Taylor's murder. The footage showed everything. Jasmine approaching the property, the van suddenly swerving after the gunshot, the crash into the fence, and most damning of all, Thomas Coy walking to the vehicle, opening the door, and dragging Jasmine's body to the ditch where the neighbor would later find her. Without those cameras, this case might have been ruled an accident, a tragic crash on a rural road, a young driver who lost control and died from her injuries. Thomas Coy might have gotten away with murder. But the cameras don't lie. They captured every second. And when prosecutors play that footage for the jury in February 2026, Thomas Coy will have no defense, no alibi, no explanation that makes sense. Go back to that opening shot, Jasmine's van pulling into the driveway at 5:47 p.m. Now that we know Thomas Coy was armed with a pellet rifle, now that we know he was prepared to shoot, now that we know he'd drag her body to cover up his crime, that moment takes on horrifying new meaning. Jasmine wasn't driving into a delivery address. She was driving into an ambush. The GPS that told her this was the correct location was leading her to her death. And the 73 seconds between her arrival and the gunshot were the last moments of her life where she felt safe, where she believed doing her job wouldn't kill her. There was no prior relationship between Thomas Coy and Jasmine Taylor. They were complete strangers. She'd probably never been to his property before. He'd probably never ordered from Amazon. But on February 5th, 2025, an algorithm sent a 23-year-old woman to a 65-year-old man's door, and that man decided she deserved to die for it. Jasmine Taylor is not the first delivery driver to be attacked while working. She won't be the last. In 2022, the Markup published an investigation revealing that over 350 gig workers had been carjacked over a 5-year period, with 28 killed. The Wired reported on families left devastated when delivery drivers were murdered, only to discover that the companies they worked for provided minimal death benefits and no legal support. Amazon drivers, DoorDash drivers, UPS workers, pizza delivery people, they all share a common vulnerability. Their jobs require them to go to strangers' addresses, often alone, often at night, with limited backup and no protection. They rely on GPS tracking and app-based safety features. But those tools can only document what happened. They can't prevent violence. They can't stop a man with a rifle from shooting through a windshield. They can't save a 23-year-old woman bleeding out in a ditch while her killer walks back to his house. Jasmine's case is particularly haunting because of how routine it should have been. It wasn't late at night. It wasn't a sketchy neighborhood. It was a rural Missouri property in late afternoon. The kind of delivery thousands of Amazon drivers make every single day without incident. Why did Thomas Coy shoot Jasmine Taylor? Prosecutors will present their theory at trial. Defense attorneys will offer their explanation. Forensic psychologists might testify about mental state. But unless Thomas Coy decides to finally tell the truth, we may never know what was going through his mind when he pulled that trigger. Was he paranoid about trespassers? Had he convinced himself that anyone entering his property was a threat? Was there a mental health crisis that his neighbors didn't see? Was this a property owner who'd weaponized his isolation, turning his driveway into a kill zone for anyone who dared approach? Or was it something even more disturbing, a random act of violence against a stranger who represented nothing more than an opportunity? A young woman, alone, in a vehicle, Vulnerable. The pellet rifle suggests it wasn't a crime of passion. You don't grab a pellet rifle in a moment of panic. You retrieve it deliberately. You load it intentionally. You aim it with purpose. The body movement proves consciousness of guilt. If Thomas Coy believed he'd acted in self-defense, why drag Jasmine to the ditch? Why try to stage it as an accident? Why not call 911 and claim he feared for his life? Every piece of evidence points to premeditated violence, followed by an attempted cover-up. But the why remains a ghost haunting this case. This was the last moment where the outcome could have changed. 5:47 p.m., February 5th, 2025. If Jasmine had been assigned a different route that day, if the algorithm had sent another driver to that address, if Thomas Coy had simply stayed inside his house and let her leave the package on his porch like millions of other homeowners do every day, but none of those things happened. Instead, a 2-year-old woman pulled into a driveway she'd never been to before, and a 65-year-old man with a pellet rifle decided her life was worth less than whatever twisted logic justified pulling that trigger. The case against Thomas Coy is overwhelming. Amazon camera footage shows him moving her body. Medical evidence proves the gunshot. His own confession ties everything together. GPS data confirms Jasmine was at the correct delivery address. There is no defense that makes sense. No explanation that justifies shooting an unarmed woman sitting in a delivery van. No legal theory that excuses dragging her dying body to a ditch and leaving her there. When the jury returns their verdict in February 2026, Thomas Coy will almost certainly be convicted of first-degree murder. He will spend whatever years he has left in a Missouri prison cell, wondering if those 73 seconds were worth destroying 2 lives, hers and his own. Jasmine Sky Taylor was 23 years old when she died. 23, an age when life is supposed to be just beginning. When you're supposed to be figuring out who you are, what you want, where you're going. She worked for Amazon because that's what millions of young people do now. The gig economy promises flexibility, independence, and income. It doesn't mention the isolation, the vulnerability, or the risk of pulling into the wrong driveway on a February afternoon. Her family has been largely silent in the media, grieving privately while waiting for justice. But their pain is evident in every court appearance, every hearing, every delay that postpones the trial and extends their agony. They'll never get another birthday with Jasmine, never get another phone call, another text, another Sunday dinner. She'll never turn 24, 25, 30. She'll never fall in love, get married, have children of her own. All of that was stolen by a man with a pellet rifle and no good reason. The trial will bring some closure. A guilty verdict will bring some justice, but nothing will bring Jasmine back. As this video goes live, Thomas Coy's murder trial is scheduled to begin in February 2026. Prosecutors will present the Amazon footage, the medical evidence, the confession. Defense attorneys will offer whatever explanation they can construct from the limited facts available. A jury of 12 people will watch that dashcam footage showing Jasmine's van pulling into the driveway. They'll see the crash. They'll see Thomas Coy dragging her body. They'll hear his confession, and they'll be asked to decide, guilty or not guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict seems inevitable, but in a courtroom, anything can happen. Reasonable doubt can emerge from unexpected places. A single juror can refuse to convict. Justice, as certain as it seems on paper, is never guaranteed until that jury foreman stands and reads the verdict aloud. The Amazon cameras showed Jasmine Taylor arriving at Thomas Coy's property at 5:47 p.m. on February 5th, 2025. They showed her van crashing after the gunshot. They showed Thomas Coy moving her body to the ditch. They showed everything except the one thing that matters most: why he did it. Jasmine died 4 days later in a hospital bed, surrounded by family who couldn't save her. Thomas Coy will stand trial for her murder 1 year later, unable or unwilling to explain his actions. The footage doesn't show what was in his mind when he pulled that trigger, but it shows exactly why he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. This case has been examined to understand behavior, not replay events. The dashcam footage, the medical evidence, the confession, they all tell the same story. A story of a young woman doing honest work who was killed by someone who saw her life as disposable. Jasmine Sky Taylor was 23 years old. She was a daughter. She was a delivery driver. She was a person trying to earn a living in a gig economy that promised opportunity but delivered vulnerability. She deserved to finish her route that day and drive home safely. Instead, a stranger with a pellet rifle decided her life was worth less than his paranoia, his property, his twisted sense of control. If you work in delivery, if you drive for Amazon, DoorDash, UPS, anyone, take every safety precaution seriously. Share your location with family. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let the algorithm pressure you into situations where you feel unsafe. These precautions might not have saved Jasmine. Her attack was so sudden, so unexpected, so seemingly random that no protocol could have prevented it. But they might save the next driver. They might give someone the extra second they need to recognize danger and drive away. Thomas Coy's trial will answer the legal question. Is he guilty of murder? The answer is almost certainly yes, but it won't answer the human question. Why did Jasmine Taylor have to die? What safety measures do you think could protect delivery drivers? How can we hold companies accountable when their workers are attacked? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have someone in your life who works deliveries, send them this video. Let them know their safety matters more than any package ever will.